We have an addiction to misery, and it is destroying our generation. It's not poverty, it's not lack of opportunity, it's not bad leaders. It's just misery. We scroll it, we share it, we bond over it, we even compete over it. It's the suffering Olympics. And the wild part is this: most of us say we want better lives, better relationships, better systems. But when change shows up, when responsibility shows up, when growth shows up, we are suddenly tired.
I'm just tired.
This is because misery is familiar, misery is validating, misery is social. And victory? Well, victory is lonely. Welcome to the Train of Thought podcast. Let's talk about misery and how it is destroying our generation. Let's start with what we can all see. I need you to look at what travels the fastest online. Outrage travels faster than hope. Bad news travel faster than progress. Complaints travel faster than solution. A person in a peaceful marriage or relationship, they don't really trend. A healed person doesn't go viral. A functioning system is boring. That is why you rarely see Norway in the news for how good things are going, but you will see the US or India in the news for how bad things are. A scandal, a breakdown, a victim story, it spreads like wildfire. We don't just consume misery, we are rewarding it. And our algorithms, they don't invent the behavior, they just reflect it. We trained these algorithms, we built them brick by goddamn brick, and we're living in its house now. In 2014, Facebook conducted a very controversial experiment, but it told us a lot about human behavior. So, researchers slightly adjusted people's news feeds. Some users saw negative content, others saw positive content. The disturbing result was that people that were exposed to negative posts began posting more negativity themselves without being told to do so. Nobody told them to post it, nobody instructed them, but they did it without realizing it because misery was contagious, not because people are weak, but because the human mind is wired to prioritize threats over safety. If something feels good, if something feels safe, the human mind is wired to ignore it. But if something feels chaotic, scary, the brain wants to put that at the front of the line because it evolved to keep you alive, not happy. Bad news will always feel urgent. Good news, it always feels optional. So negativity, it sucks and it sticks. But once it sticks, it stops sucking. And that is when it spreads. Another thing about misery that is quite unnerving is the fact that it feels good biologically. And that's why it gets very uncomfortable for somebody that is going through it to even process or understand it. Because negativity activates your nervous system. Cortisol, adrenaline, dopamine is released when you're miserable. And I'm talking about dopamine, the same chemical that is tied to pleasure and addiction. Whenever you complain about life and be miserable about how everything is going, your brain feels good because you have found something else to blame. That blame starts feeling like control. That victimhood suddenly removes responsibility from you because your brain says, that explains why things are not working. I'm not the problem. It's those guys. It is because of these guys. It is because of this woman or because of this man. And it feels good. When you watch those videos of unemployed people blaming it on the immigrants, it feels good. Can they do the jobs of the immigrants? Current affairs has shown us that they can't, but it feels good to say they took their jobs because that is easier than them going down to job center and looking for a job and standing in line. But victory, on the other hand, it demands effort. It demands accountability. It demands consistency. Sometimes there will be silence, no applause, no sympathy, no shared outrage, just pure, banal, boring, insipid work. And your body, well, it hates that. The human biology does not allow us to be bored for a long time. So it would rather you were suffering loudly than winning quietly. And this is where many people get defeated and they turn to substances and very, very destructive behaviors because the body would rather self destruct than be bored. They would rather get the high of taking a drug or get the kick out of cheating on their partner than actually work through a boring marriage or work through their problems and not take them away using drugs. The human mind hates boredom, and good times are very boring. Misery is dramatic and it loves drama. I feel like I've made that point. It will be very dramatic if you have reached this far into this episode and you haven't subscribed. So, this is me asking you to subscribe, share this video, like, and comment. Let's go the train of our podcast together. Moving on. In the movie Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, there's a character that many people probably you looked at, laughed at, and moved on too quickly. But he has so much to teach us. His name was Perito,
Spanish either.
You're funny.
the little dog. On paper, he was dealt the worst hand in the entire movie. He had been abandoned, he had been abused, he was tied up in a sock and thrown at the bottom of a river, literally thrown away. He had no power, no status, no grand destiny. And yet, somehow, he was the happiest, most fulfilled character on screen. He wasn't naive. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't unaware of pain. He just was not ruled by it. But if you contrast him with everyone else that was in the movie, Puss was a legend. He had legendary status. Women swooned over him. People worshipped him. And yet he was so terrified of death that he couldn't accept mortality. Goldilocks had a family that loved her, that took her in when she was lost, and yet she still longed and chased for another one. Jack Horner, the big fat villain, he had power, he had money, he had magic, but he still wanted everything else. In fact, he lost all that he had as he tried to pursue the wish that he didn't need. These people were not driven by needs. They didn't need any of this, but they were driven by emptiness. Perito did not want life to compensate him for his suffering, but the others did. And that is the trap. When misery becomes the lens through which you define your desires, your wants become poisoned. You don't want peace, you want revenge, but you call it justice. You don't want love, you want validation for wounds that you refuse to heal. For many people struggling to get out of poverty, even if they do, they don't really want abundance. They just want proof that their suffering meant something. And so even when you get more, the pain will stay because the misery that was meant to be a phase became your compass. Perito did not deny his pain. He just refused to let it tell him what he deserved. And that is why he was free in a way that nobody else in that movie was. Funny movie, animated movie, super powerful lesson. And another thing is we pretend not to want change. We keep lying to ourselves that we want better. I've experienced this so many times. People will come to me asking me what to do better with their lives. But the moment I tell them exactly what they need to do, they suddenly pull back. So what I've learned is many people, what they often mean is, I want relief, but I don't want responsibility. I want outcomes, but I don't want the discomfort. I want justice, but I don't want the discipline that comes with pursuing justice. It is the reason many countries are still governed by tyrants and idiots. They want the country to change, but not many people are willing to do the work for the country to actually change. So they kind of just enjoy the wallowing and the complaining and the cursing and never do anything about it. We gather in shared misery. There's something that they call Nigerian trauma bonding. Meet anybody that has lived in Nigeria, anywhere in the world, and just say, Omo, and they will immediately join you to complain about how bad Nigeria is. Nobody will offer a solution, but you spend hours trauma bonding over how bad it is. It is the same way heartbroken people trauma bond. For the men, it's the incels. For the women, it's the femcells. They trauma bond about the fact that they can't find love instead of actually changing their lives to go and find love. We build identities around pain. We turn trauma into personality. We confuse awareness with action. And the moment someone actually escapes that cycle, we look at them with a side eye. We say they have changed, that they think they're better now, that they forgot where they came from. But they just stopped romanticizing suffering. It's that simple. Many of us don't want to stop suffering because if that suffering stops, it means we won't belong to the groups where we were suffering together. And we don't want that. We kind of want to keep belonging to these groups because it feels good rather than actually being alone and changing. So we keep lying to ourselves. We keep fooling ourselves. We keep ourselves on this treadmill of never-ending pain just because we don't want to make the decision. But you see, it is easier to be a victim than a victor because victimhood will always give you community. One of the things that bother me the most is we have so many relief centers for abuse, both sexual abuse, domestic abuse. We have so very little training centers that stop people from being abused in the first place. We rehabilitate girls that face abuse instead of building centers that will teach them to fight against it, to be aware about it in the first place. We fail to build institutions that teach boys not to be abusers or girls not to be abusers, but we are quick to build systems that punish them because we tend to build communities around negativity after it has happened rather than build positive communities before it happens. Victory also will give you distance from people, but victimhood will give an explanation for anything. Victory, on the other hand, it will force you to be responsible. Victimhood will give you a story. Victory will give you work to do. And this is why misery feels safer. If you fail while trying, you own it. But if you fail while just suffering, you will explain it away and say, oh, I failed because this and this and this, and you will never actually fix it. And many people, honestly, they don't want to go through the journey of no answers, no excuses, no reasons. A time where they have to look in the mirror and say, it is me. I am the problem. Shout out to Taylor Swift. Anyway, misery will cushion your ego, but growth is going to expose it. But how do we break this cycle? First of all, this is not about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending things are fine. It's about refusing to live off of pain. And I have some real shifts that I want to give you that I hope you can try out and see if they work for you. Number one, you must starve what you do not want to become. Stop feeding outrage daily. Stop doom scrolling like it's your job. Your nervous system is not built for constant crisis. Kutzkazat has an amazing video on this subject. I recommend you check it out. Number two, you must replace complaining with construction. Instead of moaning and bitching about how life is and how politics is, etc., start making changes. You're allowed to vent, but every complaint that you have must eventually come with a plan. If it has no plan, it has no future, and you have no reason talking about it. Number three, choose responsibility even when it is unfair. Life generally is unfair. That's not new. Power will begin when you stop negotiating with reality, when you stop hoping or wishing that you were born to a different family, that you were born rich, that you know rich people, and make sure a rich family comes from you, or you start knowing rich people, or you start building your own wealth. Number four, learn to suffer in silence while building. I know that these days they tell you to build in public. It is true, but it's not good to suffer in public all the time. Not everything needs an audience. Not every season needs sympathy. Because sometimes you will reach out for sympathy and you will get that sympathy. Then you get addicted to it and you refuse to change because you are enjoying the sympathy more than you are actually grieving. It's those weirdos that turn on the camera and start crying. That's the weirdest thing ever. Like, if you're really sad, I don't think it makes sense to cut the camera on, put the lights on, make sure you're in a good angle, and you start crying. Oh my God, my husband left me. People that are going through things don't cry in front of cameras. It's because these people are addicted to the sympathy more than they are in pain. Nice tangent. Number five, you must redefine your community. Find people that ask, what are you doing about it? Don't find people that ask, who are we to blame? Who can we blame? Who's responsible? Because as long as you have somebody to blame, you will never fix the problem. But as long as you can blame yourself and take responsibility, that's where the answers start from. If you try those five things, something tells me you're going to have a much cleaner, clearer outlook on life. Misery is loud. Healing is quiet. Misery is spread. But growth requires intention. Our generation is not weak. It is overstimulated, overvalidated, and underchallenged. And the moment you stop bonding over pain and start bonding over progress, our lives will feel unfamiliar. But that is not danger. That will be withdrawal from an addiction we never knew we had in the first place. My name is Hertz Fauzan, and I remain your loyal and humble conductor. This episode is directed by Latifa, edited by Akura and Zaidan, and produced by Wole Ogidon, with a special thanks to the Train of Thought team. From all of us to you, I'll see you in the next train.